Hey, Know I listeners, I'm going to do something a little bit different today. You know that we're in our series, Know About AI, and we want to address the issue of AI and art because artificial intelligence is really impacting artists in a lot of ways. But to get that conversation started, what I think you need to address is the core reason behind why humans are drawn to create in the first place. If we can answer the question of why we want to make art and why it's important that we do, I think we'll be better equipped to then wrestle with the questions of AI and whether or not it's appropriate to use AI in creation and what the boundaries for that should look like. So to do this, I'm actually going to point you back to some content that we've done on the Know I podcast in the past. If you're a newer listener or subscriber, you may not know that last spring and summer, we did a pretty long series called Know About Creating. It's one of my favorite series that we've done because we got to talk with musicians. I got to interview writers and illustrators all about why creativity in the arts matter for human beings and why they matter from a Christian perspective. So as part of that, I did 3 back-to-back interviews with 3 different illustrators, and I really think that they do a good job of tackling this core question of why we are drawn to creation and why it's important that we do create. And I also want to highlight their perspectives because illustration and painting and those kinds of art forms are some of the ones that are really being harmed, I think, or could potentially be harmed by AI since generative AI makes images so quickly. So I actually asked all of these artists not only about their perspective on why humans create and why we're drawn to art, but also what they think about digital tools and even AI. So I'm going to include just a few short clips from each of their interviews and then apply that to what we're seeing today with AI. Hopefully that inspires you to go back and listen to those full conversations because, again, they are so good. There's so much wisdom there, and I really think you'll enjoy the whole series we did in the past. And you can find all of it at knowipodcast.com or Apple Podcasts. We weren't on YouTube at the time, but I am going to highlight them here. The first artist that I'm going to highlight is John Hendrix, and I'm going to have a couple clips from his interview. If you're not aware, John Hendrix is a best-selling author and illustrator. Here's one of his books, his recent one, actually. When I interviewed him last June, this wasn't out yet, but look at this. The Myth Makers, The Remarkable Fellowship of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. If you're listening right now on YouTube, I'm holding it up so you can actually see it. So go over to YouTube and you can look at it. It's just so pretty. In the interview, he actually talks about why they included this on the cover. So this is a graphic novel exploring, or a graphic biography, I should say, exploring the friendship of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm a big fan, big nerd. So anyways, he's just super talented. I wanted to highlight his book here, but he's written and illustrated many books. He teaches, he does all kinds of neat projects, and I think you're going to like his perspective.
We are, as Tolkien said, we are made in the image of a maker. And so we make things, and that is what sets us apart in creation. That's I think why we're made in the image of God. So yes, creating things, and that just, I mean, of course that means art to me. It means music, but I think creation, we should have a much broader definition of what that means. Everyone is a creator, even if you're an engineer. If you're writing code, you're creating things. If you're gardening, if you're mowing the lawn, you are, performing an act of creation. So yes, I feel like you cannot decouple creativity and expression from Christian faith.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And thank you for mentioning that, because that was actually something I was thinking about this morning earlier. I was getting ready for this interview and I thought, we think about creating as being artists, and if somebody is crafty or they're, they like to draw or they're a musician or whatever. But if we're all made in the image of God, then we all are creators in some aspect. And so I'm really glad that you highlighted that. And you mentioned Tolkien, and so that goes great into my next question. As I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Tolkien and Lewis, so I'm really excited about your next book, The Myth Makers: The Remarkable Fellowship of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. So as people who have read them know, they were both Christians, and so as you researched and wrote about them and illustrated their biographies, What stood out to you about the influence of their religious beliefs and backgrounds on their creativity?
People have a sense of who they were as friends, but I think most people don't really know just how close they were. And so their connection was not just one of colleagues or even friends in the same environment. They were true collaborators. And the amazing thing about their friendship was just like Galadriel gave the party in the fellowship kind of gifts that would help them on their journey. Like Tolkien and Lewis gave one another the thing they needed to complete their journey as storytellers. So, scholar Alan Jacobs said it was not like a conversion of like facts and figures and arguments. It was a way to understand the human story in the right way. And for Tolkien, Lewis gave him just simply encouragement. Like he just loved his work and told him, keep going. And when he got stuck, there was one moment, we actually don't know what exactly it was, but Tolkien was totally stuck on Lord of the Rings, and Lewis wrote him a letter, and it was just like this massive breakthrough for him in the story. So they were true collaborators. And as anyone knows in the creative arts, your work gets better in community. And we think of artists as being loners, but that's just really not true.
Okay, so what I loved about John's wisdom there is that he really immediately gets down to the core of it, is that we are made to create. If we are made in the image of God, then that means we reflect core characteristics of his. This is something that we also talked about with Peter Gaiman, the very first episode of this current series on Know About AI. And so part of being made in the image of God means that the attributes that God have, we reflect those as well. And creating is one of those attributes. And as we talked about with Philip Bunn in the last episode, we don't want to be handing over the things that we're supposed to do. We don't want to be giving away that responsibility or mental faculties to a machine, to a computer, to a technology. There are certain things that we really need to own as human beings and I think protect. Also, I love what John says about creatives needing to create in community. We think of artwork oftentimes as a loner type task. I think it's important relative to the AI conversation because AI, if we're not careful, can easily start replacing community. One of the main reasons, as we've discussed in this series, that people use AI now is for companionship, for therapists, to talk to a friend. And so if we take even another area of life, such as artwork, and siphon that off from the community where it thrives most and start doing it solo all the time, then I think that we're really going to harm ourselves as human beings.
There is always the same longing to tell a particular kind of story. And then there's the tools. The tools are what change now. So for young people, whether it's you're using a digital tablet, whether you're using Photoshop, whether you're drawing on a sheet of paper with a pen in a sketchbook, I want students to do all of those things and to be curious about the world. The thing that I actually tell most young people today, the temptation to use digital tools all the time is one that actually can hurt a sense of your own focus and growth, because almost any activity you do, the way you get better at it is to really dedicate time and focus to it. And one of the problems about drawing on digital devices is not that they're digital, is that they have all these other apps on it that are distracting. So the cool thing about a sketchbook, the cool thing about a pen and a sheet of paper is the isolation that it provides for focus on that task. So yeah, I think there is always a desire to want to try the newest tech, and I celebrate that because, illustrators have always celebrated new tools. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's loving the craft, loving the thing you're trying to make.
I know he wasn't explicitly talking about AI in this clip, but I do think it was good wisdom that John had that he gives his students, even with all the digital tools besides AI. Artists and creatives are often eager and excited to try new tools. And I know that some artists have actually been drawn to use generative AI in their artwork in some ways because it's new and exciting and they want to see what it is. But I really like his encouragement to love the craft and also enjoy the process and make sure that you are really honing your own work first. And I think that that really ties in well with some of the wisdom that we've heard from other guests on this series, that a way to use AI maybe in a healthier way is once you've already got that skill mastered for yourself. So if you are already an illustrator, and you want to play around with it and see what it can do or how it can add to your artwork, maybe that's okay. But if you're still developing your skill, you need to keep your focus and focus on your pure raw creativity just with your imagination. And I think that's beautiful advice. Let's move on though to a clip from Ross Boone. I really enjoyed this two-part interview that I did with Ross. One, just because he's such an encouraging person, but he has a take on AI that a lot of other artists don't. And in fact, he kind of is at odds with some other Christian artists in the industry, but I think it's important to consider a multitude of different perspectives. And I think he does have some valuable insight as well. So take a listen to this.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that you've written about. This is how I discovered your work, because I was looking for information on this and perspectives on this. But that is a question about artificial intelligence and artwork. So I think there's a lot of hot debate about it, especially among Christian artists, are arguing about, can AI actually make art? And something that I've seen people say is that art is really special because of the process of creating. And the process of making something actually forms who we are as human beings. So you have used AI and do in your artwork. So what is your perspective on whether or not it undermines that creative process?
The AI art that I create is strictly for I want to raise the level of the experience of receiving scriptures to the viewer. So the AI art that I make now is for a project where I'm trying to create AI art for all the scriptures in a 3-year reading plan. And it is really for deepening the experience of the viewer. But if someone finds themselves being formed and their ideas being formed by the creating of the art, definitely don't give that up. There is a role for some people, sometimes me, in the creating of the art in the way that it forms you. The pen to paper, or putting your fingers on the keyboard of the piano, or dancing or whatever, for what it does within us is powerful. But the AI art I do is distinctly different, because it is strictly for deepening the experience of the viewer, not the creator.
Yeah. Yeah, the interesting distinction. I like that. So can you talk a little bit more about that project? Because in an article you wrote, and we'll link to it, you talk about how this project has grown your spiritual imagination. And I think that's so interesting that you're using it to illuminate scripture. So can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You know how we were talking earlier about good art, or good movies and things, how they're, we absorb a lot of media. We see a lot of things in our world. As soon as we lift our eyes up from our Bible, our Bible reading, our brain goes into an entirely different category. We're seeing anime. We're seeing, fantasy movies. We're seeing steampunk art on T-shirts. We, our favorite TV shows are set in different eras that we're more familiar with. Yet, when we're reading the Bible, I fear that we get stuck in the first century context in a desert with people wearing robes and in sandals. And I think part of the value of this AI artwork is to capture the moral being expressed in the scripture, but showing it in a different context that we can relate to more in this real world. I want to just bridge that gap between our faith in the Bible and our faith everywhere else as we live our life. I want to draw those references that we're familiar with on TV and put them into, put those types of scenery into a image that demonstrates a scriptural moral. So really, it is to engage more of our senses and more of our humanity than we're used to when we're reading the scripture. We're used to, like I said, picturing men in robes and sandals in the Middle East when we read those stories. And I just think that we are in danger of getting stuck there. So, yeah, changing the context, but keeping the message pure and true so that the reading can just gain more launch into the rest of our lives.
So, what do you think? Do you agree with Ross's take? Here's actually a little preview of his app. Well, I'm holding it up on my phone. You can kind of see it. It's really cool, his app, Creature Habits. And so, again, he's using AI art for a specific project. I will say, from the art that I've seen, there is a very distinct style. And he's somebody who is already an accomplished illustrator. So, that goes to show again kind of what we have heard from a lot of other guests, that like Ross even said himself, this isn't necessarily where he is being formed, but he's trying to create a very specific project for this app that he's created in this Bible reading experience. Now, you still may think that AI art has no place in that, and that's fine, but that's his perspective. I do think it's interesting, though, that even as he's using it, he is pointing out that there is a formation that happens when humans create, when we do something creative, when we draw or write or dance, and actually the process of creating forms who we are. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that Ross has short-circuited that for himself, because this is, again, something that he is doing as an accomplished illustrator already. And I would say that maybe this is an example of him playing with some of those new tools, but he's doing it in a very specific context. Next, I want to highlight somebody else who was on the podcast, Jared Boggess. He is with Christianity Today, and he's also done some illustrating of the Bible and not using AI, and he's very cautious with it, but I think he has some great perspectives that are worth listening to as well. So we'll round out this episode with some of those clips from him. But here's an example. He actually sent this to me after we did the interview. He is working on a project with Fishcoin Press, where they're actually taking sections of the Bible at a time, book by book, and they're having different illustrators come together and illustrate parts of the Bible. So this is his On the Stations of the Cross, and there are just some amazing illustrations in there, very vivid. And so you are seeing, it's really neat to see different Christians pouring their energy through different mediums and modes of art into really illuminating scripture and making it come alive in an artistic way for people to grasp. But anyway, let's jump into what Jared has to say.
In a world where AI is accomplishing more and more, not just in the realm of the arts, but in all kinds of areas, automation and artificial intelligence are doing more and more things that humans used to have to do. And so choosing the process of actually creating something or doing a certain kind of work, the human way, so to speak, like that's really more of a significant choice nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Because we are creating alternatives. We're creating automated versions of things that we used to not have that choice. And so it does beg the question, why it gives us the opportunity to wonder, why would we do the work if there's an alternative that might get me to the end result quicker? And I think that's really important for us to wrestle with. So my daughter is preparing for a theater production right now, and we've been at the venue all week, building sets, finishing costumes, running rehearsals, and all this. And so I've been thinking about the difference between film and theater. And of course, theater is another example. There was a time when theater was the only type of visual storytelling, right? And then film slowly became more and more prominent. But what film did was it kind of showed us something that is particular and special about theater because it's live performance. It highlighted the fact that there's more at stake. Like there's more. It's more of a visceral experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the actors have to get it right on the spot with you. It's more, you know, we feel that both from an audience and as the artists putting the thing on, that you feel the difference in stakes. And so, and also it becomes a more communal thing because everyone that's physically in that room together is experiencing this communication of within this art form, right? Well, AI, I think, is going to kind of do the same thing. It's going to continue to highlight like what is different about making things from scratch. And I think, and that is it right there, is that making it from scratch is the difference. And so that becomes what sets it apart and has its own unique value because making it from scratch is part of what gives it its value. Now, going back to that Robert Farrar Capone thing, that quote, that you have to enjoy the process of getting there because that's part of the work that you put in is part of what produces the results. He compares like, imagine like you're making a dish that involves potatoes. You know, one option is fresh, peeled, cut down potatoes, you boil them, and then you mash them, right? An alternative is you can get a can of potatoes where that's already been done, or worse yet, a box of like dried potatoes, right? And it's a powder that you then rehydrate.
Yeah.
Well, you know, those fresh potatoes are going to taste better. And so there's this sense in which what the work that you put into it actually creates a better final result or creates more value in it in some way. And I think the alternative to automation is going to reveal that more. Like in a certain sense, like AI is the canned version of you know, painting something on a canvas yourself kind of thing. What ended up being a difference here is that AI isn't creating a new medium. It's just mimicking art forms that already exist. So I struggle to see it as a tool in the same way that Photoshop or Procreate is a tool for illustrators or these generators within sound recording studio for music. That I've struggled to see it as a tool in the same sense because it's just reproducing or replacing the creative process essentially.
Yeah, man, lots of food for thought. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I thought of something else. Like the caveat to all this is like, I think there is a place for this technology, and I think it's really good. You know that there's an opportunity here to make things more time efficient, and to you know, to do automated computations for really, really complicated machinery and you know, and I've heard of ways that this could help in the medical field. You know, those are good things. Like we have the opportunity to make the world a better place. But or even like, can we use it to shortcut mundane tasks, right? Like it's almost like we're looking at a painter and we're saying, here, I've made this tool for you so that you can save hours and even days, months of time. Instead of painting, you can make this image really quickly, and now you have plenty of time to go do your dishes. You know, like that's the stuff we should be trying to automate. Like, let's save time on the mundane tasks so that we have time to pour into creativity, not shortcutting the creative processes.
Yeah.
But again, like there's a place for this stuff. We just got to find the right ways to use it, I think.
So that's Jared Boggess, and he had so much to say. His whole interview, we really did focus on AI. So I would recommend definitely go back and listen to the whole thing. And I hope you go back and listen to all of these interviews. We've been doing the No I podcast for a while now. So even though we're new on YouTube, you can go back and listen to old content. And I really would recommend the Know About Creating series if you want to think more deeply about the issue of AI and creation. But we're still going to be tackling the issue of AI I in general in this series know about AI. So if you haven't yet, if you're watching right now, go ahead and subscribe on YouTube so that way you won't miss any episodes. And if you don't mind, leave us a rating and a review anywhere you listen to podcasts. Even if you like to watch on YouTube, you can go over to the Apple Podcast app and give us a rating and write a review because that helps other people find the Know Why podcast as well. We'll see you next week.